Welcome to Path to Med Episode 2. I'm your host, Suhani Pandya, and today I'm excited to introduce our guest, Hiba Chaudhry. Hiba is a fourth-year student at McMaster University, where she studies molecular biology and genetics. She received the McMaster University Reward of Excellence Entrance Scholarship and made the honor roll in multiple courses. So it's really nice to have you here on today's episode.
Thank you for having me.
So, just to start off the interview, what inspired you to pursue a medical career?
So, I think I've always, from a very young age, knew that I wanted to do medicine. And the main driver behind that was my younger brother. So, my younger brother was diagnosed with autism when he was about 2 years old. So, along with autism comes a lot of other health issues as well. So, throughout my whole life, he's only 2 years younger than me. I just remember going to different doctors and always just trying to get more information from doctors, be it regarding his epilepsy or arthritis. Doctors were always involved in our life, and they always helped us a lot. So anytime there was an appointment with a doctor, it always gave not just him, but the family some more reassurance. And when a family is reassured, it impacts communities, not just one person. So I always thought that I would love to be someone that can help a variety of people and hopefully impact a community in a positive way.
The doctors helped your family and your community in a certain way, and then you sort of be able to give that back to your broader communities.
Absolutely, yes.
So how did you decide that it was a right fit for you?
hmm So I'll start with high school because you're in high school. Starting in high school, I did something called the IB program. And in the IB program, we had to pick two higher level courses, and it was a pick between economics or biology. So I decided to pick biology, and that's kind of when I fell in love with not just physiology, but my favorite unit ended up being molecular biology and genetics. And I also really loved human biology as well. So just going from there, I decided that, okay, I want to do my degree in biology. And then from that, I decided, okay, medicine will come after that. And then in university, I decided to do a research specialization just because I thought it was a better idea than not doing any research at all within my degree. Just in case, medicine, I decided that it wasn't the right thing I wanted to do. Um, Maybe I would have, as I went through my degree, wanted to do something more research based. So with the degree I have, that would have been an option for me. But I ended up just continually loving medicine so much. So I know that even with the degree I have, I can pursue medicine alongside that.
So this is a little bit similar, but why did you decide to major in molecular biology
hmm
versus a health or life science program? Because I know that's also a really common path that people take.
Yes. Yeah. So in first year, I entered through the life science gateway. You kind of have to. And I decided to specialize. A lot of people stay broad. I decided to specialize, A, because medical school in Canada, as you know, is super competitive. And there's not a guarantee that you do get into medicine right away, especially I know so many people work so hard to get in, and it sometimes just doesn't happen. So I decided that, okay, having a research specialization will give me built in research into my program. And that would be great if I wanted to pursue a master's after. I wouldn't have any trouble with that. And then also, I loved molecular biology in high school. So I was debating between sorry, specializing in physiology or molecular biology and genetics. And ultimately, I chose molecular biology and genetics. And also, I kind of discovered my love for oncology. I found it super interesting. In third year, I had this course called molecular eukaryotes, and we just started to talk more about different cancer therapies, and all of those are happening at a molecular level. So I kind of connected that to, okay, with medicine, I feel like oncology is such a good kind of combination of molecular biology and medicine. That's kind of where I'm at these days with that.
So would you consider going into oncology in the future
I
or no?
would, 100%. Yeah.
So what are some of the courses or also opportunities that are unique to your major specifically?
So within my major, a lot of the courses are very lab focused. So there's wet lab and dry lab. For the dry lab aspect, in third year, we had a bioinformatics course, and that's probably the course I was most hesitant about. Um, with this major because there's no prerequisite that really prepares you for bioinformatics. You know, in first year, you have your general, um, there's a course that's for evolution and ecology that's combined, and then there's another course for cell biology. So those are your first year courses. In second year, there's microbiology, there's physiology, there's genetics. And so those were also good preparatory courses, but for bioinformatics, because it's just genome sequencing, so that was a new learning curve, but it was super exciting. It was all done on computers, and we just learned the basics. And genome sequencing is the future of science. So everything that happens with healthcare, hopefully in the future, you know, we might have personalized medicine. And so for that, you can just learn how to sequence anyone's genome and see, you know, if there are any abnormalities or how to treat someone. So that I also found super interesting. And then my favorite course that I did in third year was development. So within development labs, we analyzed chick embryos. We did a lot of Drosophila analysis, so fruit fly labs, fruit fly imaging, and that was super fun. Second year had a ton, which I'm trying to think about now. Um, just your typical in microbiology, we did the basics like streaking, pipetting was the first year. You're going to learn a lot of that. Organic chemistry labs had a lot of lab work. So there's a lot of lab work built into molecular biology and genetics itself. So you can look for other research opportunities outside. I would recommend that as well. But there is a lot built into the course.
So, how does your major and some of this lab work kind of complement your goal of becoming a physician?
I think again, it just comes down to the future of personalized medicine at a molecular level. For example, I talked about oncology, so that's kind of something I discovered that all of this is happening at a molecular level. A lot of medicine and therapies are, you know, people are investigating those at a molecular level. And I just thought because I ultimately chose molecular biology over physiology, just because I wanted to study that super basic, everything, you know, everything stems from cells. I'm sure they teach you that a lot in high school. Cells are the basis for everything. So that's just what I wanted to focus on for my degree.
So, what made you select McMaster specifically over other universities?
I wouldn't say there was any big academic reason other than it's super close to my house. It's very convenient. I was debating between U of T and McMaster, but ultimately I decided that for a bachelor's degree, McMaster would be nice. I love the community at Mac. Super great, super tight knit. I thought it doesn't come down to anything super academic. I thought U of T was just super too big. I thought for undergrad I wanted something a little more personalized and a little closer. So I ended up going with McMaster. Western MedSci was another program that I really considered, but ultimately location, I chose McMaster.
You mentioned that you did IB. So, would you
Mm-hmm.
say that you were pretty well prepared for university? And if not, like, what can people in high school do to sort of make that transition and like learning curve easier?
I think first year was easy for me because of IB. Because of the workload, it really prepares you. I don't think that's exclusive to IB. I think it depends on your study habits. If you have really strong study habits in grade 12, for example, a study habit that I would recommend would just be flashcards. I think flashcards are a super underrated tool. Um, you want to study properly, not just reading textbooks. And I know maybe in high school I fell into the trap of the longer I study, the better it is. And that's not necessarily true. You can study smarter. So I think IB kind of taught me how to study smarter and balance extracurricular activities along with university coursework. And then second year was the year I thought was hardest for me because the prereqs are kind of over. I found first year there was a lot of overlap with grade 12 work. And my first year, the first semester, a lot of it was online because of COVID. But second year, because they're just starting to build on harder topics, that's the year I found a little bit more challenging. So I would just encourage students to really dig into their learning habits and staying calm, especially, is most important. When you stay calm, you can really do anything.
Your program does have a research specialization where you get to do an undergraduate thesis.
Mhm.
So, what does this process sort of look like? And how did you pick your area of research?
So there were a lot of options. In second year, I did an ecology course. And I loved it, but I also figured out that ecology was not for me. So there are a lot of professors who work in ecology and plant biology. I also, in second year, volunteered with my ecology professor. We analyzed water samples from Coots Paradise. It's a creek near McMaster. And it was fun, but I also realized that for my thesis, I wanted something a little bit different. And I think in third year. In third year, they sent out a form where, we filled everything we were done and interested in, and then we could rank our three professors that we wanted to work with. And luckily, my second year genetics professor, he reached out to me and asked if I wanted to do a thesis in his lab. And so I didn't have to go on a super long hunt. The professor I wanted came to me, so I was super grateful for that. And then we talked about all of the work he does in his lab. And this is Professor Jiaping Zhu, and he has a lot of interesting PhD students. He also has two students who did engineering degrees, but now are working in his lab, and that was super cool. He also has a lot of they analyze bat populations, but I decided that I was going to work on fungi, and so we picked a fungi, and I'm just going to analyze their virulence factors. So I don't know what that process is going to look like yet, but hopefully, with some guidance, we're going to figure that out this year.
How can undergrad students, you talked a little bit about research, but how can they
Mhm.
kind of make the most out of their undergrad to prepare for med school? And like looking back, is there anything that you kind of would have done differently?
I think I didn't do as many extracurriculars as I should have. So I think in first year I did do them. And then the summer of first year I did. Summer after second year, I focused on doing the MCAT for the first time. So, and then this year I took it again. So the MCAT is super time consuming. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of energy. So, although I did not want to do it again, I thought I would try and get a bit of a better score, a more competitive score the second time around. I would encourage you guys to try and have the mindset, okay, I'm only going to do the MCAT once, and kind of just block out time for that. That way it doesn't take two whole summers and you can have another summer of balancing more extracurriculars. Within the school year itself, it is possible to work alongside schoolwork. I did. You just have to be really good at organizing yourself. So for me, I use Google Calendar, and then everything that's in Google Calendar, I also just the simple notes app. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Break down your week, write down everything you have to do for the day, prioritize. If something comes up, you can. I had some professors that were really great with extensions. For example, I took a history elective um, because I've always found history exciting, but maybe if we get the chance, I will talk about the drawbacks of that after. But that professor was super understanding with extensions, and I was able to get an extension on an essay in a super busy week. I had a ton of labs. So always ask professors. There's no harm in asking, right? And that will just help, keep yourself put together.
I believe that you wrote your MCAT last week for
Yes,
the
I
second
did.
time.
Yes.
So, how did you find that? And did you find that your like undergrad programs kind of prepared you for it a little bit?
The biology and biochem section, 100%. That was probably my best section, especially this time. I felt really good after writing that. Um, of course, I think my program goes beyond the basics of what you need to do, but within my program, in all of our course tutorials, we had a lot of practice with analyzing research articles and then presenting a research article. So I would say we did that once in almost every single course, be it individually or in groups. And on the MCAT, there's most of the questions are passage based. There's a lot of passage based questions. Most of them are actually. So I was very comfortable with analyzing a passage, looking at the research, and then answering the questions. Because the MCAT is you do need to know your content well, but a lot of it is analytical. So you just have to get comfortable with analyzing those research articles, and the more practice you do, the better. Biology and, the chemistry and physics section, yes, I also think my program prepared me for that because we did have to do 2 semesters of organic chemistry within my program. Those were mandatory for genetics. And physics, only the first one is mandatory, but I ended up taking the second general physics as well. And I don't think that's necessary for the MCAT, but a lot of US medical schools want you to do 2 years of physics, so that's the reason why I ended up doing that one. First year psychology. I did both first year psychology courses. I thought that was super helpful for the psychology sociology section. If you want to do an introductory sociology course, you can, but it's also, I think, easy to learn. It's the section that most people do the best on. And then cars is a section that is hard for a lot of people. I don't know if there's a course that can prepare you for that. You just have to, I guess, read a lot. But each passage is so different. There's history passages, there's art history passages. So I can give advice for cars if you like, but it just comes down to practicing and learning the tips and tricks that the MCAT gives. But if you want MCAT advice, I just say practice, practice, practice. The more practice you can get, the better. Don't get bogged down in content review. Practice is really going to be your best chance of getting a higher score, which is what I didn't do the first time. I thought the first time I focused so much on content. If I was worried I was missing these small details. Oh no, I forgot, a specific detail of a biological process. It doesn't matter. Usually the article is going to give you a lot of information anyways. You just have to get really good at pulling out information. So yeah, practice is your best friend for the MCAT.
Do you think you could tell us a little bit about the med school application process?
Mm-hmm. So I don't know much about that as of yet because I am going to go through the med school process this year. But I would say I think the sooner you make connections with your professors, the better, because you're going to need letters of recommendation. So I think, attending office hours, speaking to the professors, um, showing interest in their research, that's another way you can actually get to work with the professor if you're interested in volunteering within their lab, going to office hours, participating during class. McMaster is a big university. A lot of our classes were big, especially in first year and second year. In third year, my classes got a little bit smaller because they were more, specific to my program. But yeah, making connections with professors. There's a lot of resources within universities, and they can help you, draft your personal statement. Um, I think having a really strong personal why of why you want to be a doctor is going to be super helpful during the application process. Beyond just, of course, our end goal is always helping people, but I think they're looking for something specific to you and why do you want to be a doctor specifically when there's so many other amazing professions within the healthcare field. I think that's something, a strong answer. You need a strong answer to that question for them to see why you're interested in medicine.
Are you applying only to Canadian med schools or also the States as well? And I'm not sure if you would know this because you're still applying, but is the process pretty similar?
So I'm applying to Canada, the States, and also to Ireland. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Atlantic Bridge program. Um, but Ireland has a great program that you apply through Atlantic Bridge, and then they send your application to a ton of Irish schools um, that are also that would take international students. And I'm not sure too much about the specific process. For the US, you apply through AMCAS, and Ontario also has their own system. And then, of course, each province will have their own um, application systems. I know that the US places a ton of emphasis on shadowing, whereas in Canada does not place a huge emphasis on shadowing. So that might be something to take into consideration. That's a little bit different. Um, and I think Canada places a bigger emphasis on research, and the US doesn't place that much of an emphasis on research. So there's just a little bit, these small caveats that you just have to pay attention to. Other than that, I don't think the application process is super different. A lot of Canadian schools will ask for Casper as well on top of the MCAT. For US schools, there's the preview exam, but there's also not as many US schools that will take Canadian students. So you can just compile a list of the ones that do. And even within that list, there are certain schools that have a higher, if you don't want to apply to too many schools, you can look at the statistics of how many Canadian students that apply each year and are accepted. So yeah, that's something to look into.
I know that GPA is obviously really important for like med school applications.
Mm-hmm.
So should people that are in high school consider how easy it is to get a high GPA when you're picking like your undergrad major or your university? Like I know that U of T is known for having really, really tough grading. So
Mm-hmm.
is that kind of something that they factor in or
I would think, I know Canada places a huge emphasis on having a 4.0. I do not have a 4.0. Not even close, actually. I'm not in the 3.9 range. I think that's something to consider before specializing. So, for example, if I was, in health sci or in life sci, um, I would have higher chances of getting a higher GPA. Ultimately, I decided to take the risk and go into genetics and molecular biology in case I wanted to do a master's, or also I thought that the research experience I would get would be worth it. Um, I think, though, you can also be careful when picking your electives. So that's what I was talking about when I briefly mentioned my history course. I love history. I love political science as well. I did a first year political science course. Those courses are great to learn, but I think if you're worried about a GPA, you might want to consider taking easier electives. McMaster has something called bird courses. I don't know if you've heard that term
Oh
before.
yeah,
Bird
yeah.
courses, yeah. Bird courses are basically the courses where if you work hard, you're guaranteed to almost get perfect in the course. And third year, I finally took a bird course that everyone was talking about, and I was like, oh my God, yes, this was a good, nice little boost. Um, but yeah, I think unfortunately the reality is that we do have to worry a lot about our GPA and we can't just take courses out of interest. But I'm hopeful that, I would be able to talk about my interests and kind of connect that to medicine and give some reasoning, as to why a grade in a certain course might not be as high. I remember in history, we had to write three main essays, and the first one I got a B minus and just panicked because a B minus is honestly not great. Especially in our brain, we just have it that, okay, it has to be an A, it has to be an A. Of course, I improved as the course went on, but history is hard to get perfect in. So that's something to take into consideration. You can pick your electives wisely to make sure you get a higher GPA.
Especially like essays or also like letters of recommendation. I feel like you'd have a lot to put there as well because of your
Yes.
major. So there's like pros and cons, I guess.
And I did take one of the courses that I loved. I took it as an elective, but it was my favorite. I took Indigenous Health. So it is a health sci course, but they had it open for anybody to take, and I fought my way to get into that course. There's something called seat alert. So even when a course is full, you can sign up. I think it's like $2 now per course, and they'll send you alerts when someone dropped it so you can quickly enroll. I got into that. The professor for that was amazing. It was super eye opening. I didn't know much. Um, of course, in elementary school and in high school, we learn about residential schools, but that's kind of it. We don't learn anything else. We don't learn any of the trauma that Indigenous peoples have had to face within the healthcare system and continue to face. So I think that was really an important course that I think should be mandatory for anyone who wants to go into medicine. Take an Indigenous health course. It's so critical because there's so many inherent biases that we have that we just don't realize. So if there is an elective to take, I would highly, highly recommend taking an Indigenous health course.
What extracurriculars have you been involved with in or also outside your university?
Hmm.
And how do you kind of balance that with your heavy courses?
Yeah, so summer after, even within first year, um, I did do a club, and because school was online, it was pretty easy. It was called Demystifying Medicine. So it's basically knowledge translation, making science easier for everyone to understand. So we focused on that. We ran a bunch of different online seminars, and we did Kahoots and stuff and games, and we tried to make videos that, for example, let's take COVID, describing COVID vaccines, how safe they are, making it simple for people to understand. So that's what I focused on in first year. And then I think this was the summer after first year, I worked in the office of Arano Kids. It's a treatment center for children with autism. So I worked during the summer there, and I think I would highly encourage people to take advantage of their summers because that's when you have the most time. We have 4 months off. So yeah, I worked there during the summer, and then second year was so overwhelming for me. I did not do anything during the school year. I just focused on getting through school. Um, oh, and then I did do, actually, no, second semester of second year, I did do some volunteering in that ecology professor's lab. So I did do that. It wasn't a whole lot. It was less than 20 hours, just for a little bit. We analyzed water samples. And I think it's easy because for that lab specifically, while the water samples were being processed, I would just open up my computer and do a few flashcards. Um, for example, like a physiology class, I would encourage you after each lecture to just make flashcards for that lecture and then go over them. I don't know if you've heard of Anki, but
Oh, I
bas
have, yeah.
Anki is amazing because you can click how many days later you want to review it and it'll just pop up for you. So anytime you see, oh, I have an Anki flashcard, let me just quickly get through those. I would encourage it because if you just have some free time on your phone and you're doing something, go through a few flashcards. Come test time, you already know so much of the content because of spaced repetition. You might not need to do that much review, so you can give more time to your extracurriculars or work and stuff like that.
I believe that they also, like, when you get a flashcard wrong, you can like rank how easy it is, and
Yes,
then it like gives you the same question again.
yes.
So that's probably helpful.
There's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a day, 2 days, and then you can just keep going from that.
So you mentioned going into research, but what are some other alternative career paths that you've kind of considered with your degree?
There's a lot. I have a few friends that want to go into genetic counseling, which I find super interesting. That's an option. Um, Another friend focused on getting a minor in math and statistics along with her degree, and she was super interested in population genetics. So I think she's going to do her master's in that. I think what comes with science is ultimately you most likely will have to do a master's or a PhD to get a better job. So I think that's something to keep in mind. But I also have heard of plenty of people who do engineering degrees and decide they want to go into medicine later. So you could do an engineering degree, um, get a job with that degree, or go into computer science. Just make sure you have the prereqs that you need for medical school. Canada doesn't have that many. The US focuses more on prerequisites, which, sorry, going back to your last question about the differences between Canada and the US, I forgot to mention the US does have more requirements for courses that you need. So, like, Canada doesn't really look at you having 2 whole semesters of physics with labs, or 2 whole semesters of orgo with labs, or English, for example. I think UBC wants you to have an English course. Maybe Ottawa does as well. I'm not 100% sure. I ended up getting English through transfer credits from doing IB. So I did not do English in university. So I still think I'm going to apply to a few master's program. I'm also considering an Indigenous health master's program just because I loved it so much. Um, and I think it's so important to learn and advocate for better Indigenous healthcare. So those would be some other career paths. I think ultimately with the program and major I have, I would have to do a master's in order to get a better job.
People with other like pre-med majors like life sciences and health sciences, would they also have like similar, I guess, opportunities for other careers?
I think with health sci life sci could be a little bit trickier to get into research afterwards because they just haven't done so much coursework. I think with health sci specifically, it's a wonderful program. They do have slightly higher chance of getting accepted into medical school if you are in health sci. That's just what the statistics say. Um, but I have two family friends who both did McMaster Health Sci, both graduated with 4.0s. One friend, she is just now starting into medical school, so she spent 2 years after her degree working and redoing the MCAT to try and get into medical school within Ontario. She unfortunately didn't with those 2 years, but then she did a master's in global health at McMaster. With her health side degree, she went into global health and she got in this year. So she's starting medical school in September, but it did take her 4 years. So I think she's 26, 27 now. And that is, I believe, the average age to get into medical school within Ontario. It's kind of gone up to 26, 27. And then the other family friend that I have, she just decided that she was going to go into business. So she got her MBA and she went into business and left healthcare entirely. So with health science, there isn't a huge opportunity, I think, to go into those super research intensive masters unless you've done a lot of research work on the side, because within their coursework, by the time they get into third and fourth year, their courses are mostly focused on healthcare. And I think they're great courses to also not only get high GPA in, but they're very, very focused on healthcare, which is wonderful. But in the event that you don't get into medical school, which is likely, I think it's important to have a backup. And that's also another reason why I picked my program, because it's so research intensive. I knew that I could get into a good master's program with it.
So then it sounds like health science programs like prepare you well to go to med
Yes,
school and get into med school, but then
yes,
in the case that you don't, you're kind of stuck a little bit.
100%. Yeah, because my program, the emphasis is not on getting into medical school. It's not with the grading, it's not with the teaching. The teaching is really focused on those research techniques, which is why I think health science is so great. Um, they don't have that many seats, but I also think it's important to keep in mind not everyone is going to get in. Very few people do get into medical school. So to have a plan, okay, just in case I don't, what am I going to do after? Do I like master's programs that are focused on global health, or do I want to do something that's a little bit more science based and more research intensive? So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
Just to finish off the interview, what advice would you give to high schoolers like me who are considering a career in medicine?
Stay calm. Number one, stay calm. That's the most important advice I can give. Um, I'm still learning how to stay calm and not to stress about anything, especially my second year. I think that was just peak, especially organic chemistry. The second organic chemistry really was really difficult. I remember everyone was saying, okay, the second orgo, that's going to be really hard. And I was like, how bad can it be? It can be bad. Especially when you have four other courses that were all science based. I believe that same semester I had genetics, physiology, microbiology, and I think statistics. So those were my five courses. Um, that was hard. It was hard.
Oh
I
my
think
gosh, yeah.
prioritizing, I think I thought because the first orgo was easy enough, the second one I'd also kind of figure it out. The second one was different. There was a lot more, it was a lot more memorization based. So I think making flashcards and again using Anki, that spaced repetition is going to be your best friend. I would recommend interleafing with studying. So if you've spent an hour on a subject, your brain's kind of getting tired, but you still know you have a lot of work to do, just switch the subject, move on to something else. It doesn't matter if the last task wasn't fully done. Move on to something else, and then you can go back to it later. And talking to your professors, having a good relationship with your professors, your TAs are always there to help. I think a lot of mine were super helpful. Some of them not so much, but you can always go to the professor for that. Um, Friends who have other TAs, you can ask that friend what their TA said, see if they said something different. If you think a TA is grading unfair, you can, talk to the professor eventually if you need to. Course coordinators are also super helpful people. There's a lot of resources within the library if you need writing help, take advantage of those. I think just look for resources that are available to you and use them. Don't be afraid to use them. Don't be shy to speak up and lecture. No one's going to remember you. I think people might think of that as a negative thing, but nobody really cares what someone else is doing. Everyone is so in their heads. Um, about how to get into the program of their choice. And I think not seeing other people so much as competition. I think pre-meds, sometimes the community can be a little bit toxic, so not falling into that. I'm grateful that within my program, I do have friends that want to go to medical school, but I also have friends that don't want to go into medical school. And we're all so helpful and help each other with our coursework, super encouraging. I think just remembering that someone else's success is not the absence of your own. Everyone's path to success looks different. It might take someone might get into medical school quick, but they might have a harder time matching into residency later, or they might struggle with a certain aspect of their training later and might have to spend, more time doing that. While someone else, could take them longer to get in, but other things could be a breeze. So I think not comparing your journey, everyone's life circumstances are also so different. And just remembering that you'll get to where you need to go. And, you can always, in the rare occasion you need to repeat a course, you can always repeat a course. It's not the end of the world. There are other things you can do before getting into medical school. You might decide that medicine is no longer what you want to do, and that's okay. You can talk to people, what are they called? Guidance counselors. Yes, you can talk to
Oh,
your guidance
yeah.
counselors. Um, Sometimes they're helpful and sometimes they're not so helpful. Ultimately, the choice of what to do is yours. After second year, I think it just felt like such a beat down. It was really hard for me. I considered switching into life science, just keeping it general. I thought, okay, maybe these courses are a little bit too hard. I don't want my GPA to go down too much. Maybe I should switch into life science. I went to a guidance counselor to ask her what to do, and she was like, the choice is yours. I didn't find her super helpful. I was like, okay, maybe this just stressed me out a little bit more. So I think staying calm within your own head and just making a clear decision. I looked back at the third year courses and I decided, okay, these third year courses still look interesting to me. And I decided to go for it. And third year has been my favorite year so far. Hopefully, fourth year is even better. But yeah, I had a good experience. So just number one rule, just stay calm and keep going. It'll all be okay.
Well, thank you so much. That was so helpful.
Thank you for having me.
It was so nice to have you on today's episode.